BC when he warned about the artists, quote unquote, this has been misinterpreted by many scholars, but he just said that the artists, quote unquote, if they're given too much dominion over the mind, there will be a decline of civilization. I believe that he was aware even then of people who are still with us, still operating in our society today. Don't believe it? This is a quote. It says, "I think we are destroying the minds of America, and that has been one of my lifelong ambitions." You can read for yourself who wrote that. They're happy to tell you what they're doing. Well, here's the results of their fine work. Heroin and cocaine use among white youth climbed about 300% over the 2 decades before the 90s. For African American youth, it jumped to a staggering 13 times the rate of 20 years before. Their frequency of eating disorders in teenage girls has skyrocketed. You're going to find out why. While any of these problems in isolation raises no eyebrows, taken as a group, they are barometers of a sea change, a new kind of toxicity seeping into and poisoning the very experience of childhood, signifying sweeping deficits in emotional competences. But the other side, they say, oh, kids love advertising. It's a gift. It's something they want. There's something to be said about being in there first, about branding children and owning them in that way. And in boys advertising antisocial behavior in pursuit of a product, that's a good thing. In 1990, compared to the previous 2 decades, the United States saw the highest juvenile arrest rate for violent crimes ever. Teen arrests for forcible rape had doubled, teen murder rates quadrupled, mostly due to an increase in shootings. During the same 2 decades, suicide rate for teenagers tripled, as did the number of children under 14 who are murder victims. Douglas Rushkoff, in his book Media Virus, says children's television and MTV are the easiest places to launch countercultural missiles. The more harmless or inane the forum, the more unsuspecting the audience. I highlighted MTV there for an interesting point. One of the methodologies that these individuals use in their corporate logos is based on the phoneme system. If you say the word as a mantra to yourself, MTV, and say it quickly, MTV, MTV, empty TV, empty TV, empty TV, empty TV. Ever seen any kids that watch MTV? They look pretty empty to me, wouldn't you say? Well, that's what they were being told. The great philosopher and theologian Erasmus said, "The main hope of a nation lies in the proper education of its youth." The others are saying to the children, forget it. Questions are a burden, and answers a prison for oneself. Let us take control. Stop thinking. It's too much of a bother. We'll take care of you. So the experts are saying, what is at stake?
And didn't we see that nowadays with the whole, disinformation and misinformation, and the whole thing that the organization that the wing of, the U.S. Security Department was put together to fact check basically and tell you what is real information, what's not. But it's what it is what's the official White House narrative on the narrative on any topics. Then unless you're agreeing with it wholehearted and going along with it, then you're spreading disinformation. But we've seen since the end of 2019 through 21, 22, that, I mean, the White House, from the moment they opened their mouth, they fed you lies. And they have arms of social media to the broad media and your domestic media that tell you that, what they were saying was true, and to question them was it was an act of terrorism, that it was just a whole messed up situation. I mean, you pointed out, hey, this thing seems to be affecting the elderly, and the younger people weren't taking it serious, so they vilified and condemned young people that went to spring break in Florida because they weren't playing along with this. And now the numbers come out from the UK and Israel that, people that were affected from this, that died from this, and this thing was the sole cause of it, technically, actually, the numbers show you they were people that were over the age of life expectancy. So why condemn and lash at the people that weren't being affected by this? Because they weren't playing along, and you needed everyone to play along. So, I mean, just the whole, just even the equipment that was suggested being used. I mean, come to find out, they weren't. The head of the health organizations were lying about what equipment to use and things of that nature. I mean, the whole thing was a mess. But if you questioned it and you asked, "Hey, what's really going on?" you were the problem. I mean, you had comedians sitting up there making jokes. "Hey, what do you do your own research?" Oh, isn't that what scientists are doing? Isn't that what these so-called experts, but we never know who they are, so we can look at what title they have, so we can actually ask what credentials they have. I mean, if we're talking about experts, then aren't we just talking about Bill Gates? I mean, he's not a doctor. He never finished college. So, but he's held up in, this guy that has all the answers. So, but we've seen it. And I think it's interesting. This keeps going back to how destructive it is for the children, but it's mostly been destructive for the males. And I keep thinking about that verse from the book of Isaiah, that the day will come where a man will be worth more than gold. I wonder why. Because if you can come out of this and have any kind of integrity and any kind of standards, and you're not flimsy and just go with whatever the narrative is, it seems to be that that's the only ones that are going to come out of this. I mean, when it comes to the males,
is nothing less than the next generation, particularly males who in growing up are especially vulnerable to such disruptive forces as the devastating effects of divorce, poverty, and unemployment. The status of American children and families is as desperate as ever. We are depriving millions of children of their competence and moral character. Look at just the terminology there. We are depriving millions of children of their competence and moral character. Not they, but we. Esquire magazine said kids won't even find out how much their values have been perverted until they hit the high school. And Douglas Rushkoff says we have come to expect hidden messages in our kids' television. But this story of manipulation goes way back and has occult roots. Anyone who's done their homework knows that one of the groups that operate behind secret societies, it was the Fabian Society from Oxford University. It was founded by Sidney West, who again is very happy to tell you what they're doing. He says to play on those millions of minds, to watch them slowly respond to an unseen stimulus, to guide their aspirations without their knowledge. All this, whether in high capacities or in humble, is a big and endless game of chess with ever extraordinary excitement.
Now remember, fair use is a law that allows me to use limited copyright material without actually having to ask for the permission, right? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to use this because it's going to fit into the previous work, the video that was just shown.
Here's just one page I want you to see here.
For 10 and up, huh?
It's unspeakable what these people have done to our children.
When did that start? When was it decided that we need to start teaching kids about this stuff at such a young age?
So I'll answer that with one word: Kinsey. Kinsey was a social reformer. He wanted to rid society of Judeo-Christian values when it came to sexuality. And he worked very hard to do that, and I would say he succeeded.
Kinsey would be very happy with our culture today. His idea was that children are sexual from birth, that we're all inherently sexual creatures from cradle to grave. He believed that true happiness is found in a life of perverse sexual experimentation, no matter the age.
What came out is that his research was fraudulent.
Kinsey based his fraudulent conclusions on data he collected from convicted sex offenders and child molesters. His research was conducted in prisons, not everyday America. He also performed horrific sexual experiments on children, some under the age of 1. His most influential book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, contains an infamous chart called Table 34, which documents the orgasms of very young kids, including babies as young as 5 months old. But instead of suffering the consequences for his heinous actions, he was and still is celebrated by academia and Hollywood. His ideas form the foundation for sexual education in public schools today. How do we get from this to you can choose your own gender?
Okay, well, now we have another very important character, and his name was John Money.
John Money was a psychologist and professor at Johns Hopkins University. Gender ideology was his brainchild. In fact, he coined the terms gender identity and gender roles. And according to Money, babies are gender neutral at birth, and ultimately environment determines whether a person is a man or a woman.
Money was telling the world about his theory that a boy could be raised as a girl and do just fine, and vice versa.
And so Money tried out his theory on 2 young twin boys, the Reimer twins.
When the twins were 8 months old and they went to be circumcised, the first twin, whose name was Bruce, something went wrong with the machinery and his penis was burnt off. They stopped and didn't do a second circumcision on the other twin, as you might imagine. And the parents, of course, didn't know what to do. How are they going to raise this child?
John Money convinced Bruce's parents to transition him into a girl. Money also conducted sexually abusive experiments on the twins throughout their childhood, including forcing them to simulate sex acts on each other.
He reported up to the age of 10 that this was a complete success. Well, wasn't true.
The results were a disaster. Bruce could never fully accept his female identity. Eventually, his parents told him the truth, and he chose to transition back to a boy, taking the name David. As an adult, David spoke out about the abuse and the damage done to him by John Money.
The girls would do their things with their Barbies and things like that, and that wouldn't interest me. And things such as trucks and building forts and getting to the odd fist fight and climbing trees, that's the kind of stuff that I like, but it was unacceptable, so I'd never...
As a girl.
As a girl, I had no place to fit in.
The trauma that he and his brother and his entire family went through left deep scars. His brother died of an overdose when he was 38, and then David committed suicide.
There was never a retraction or an apology from John Money. Instead, his ideas were adopted by mainstream psychology, and they form the basis of gender ideology today. Why don't more people know about John Money and Alfred Kinsey?
Evidently, there are forces that don't want this information out.